This is one of his most famous works, Wheatfield with Crows. At first glance, it's a simple rural scene, but look closer and you'll see it's actually very badly made. Take these birds. Apparently, they're crows, but it's impossible to know because there's no detail at all. Some are big, some are small, some have more wings than others. Look at those strokes. They're sloppy. It's like he painted it wearing boxing gloves. It's just not good enough. In fact, it's actively bad. Van Gogh's life, and by extension our world, would have been improved if he'd never painted anything. Not even a bog door in a home for the blind. Anyway, that's my view. What do you think?
Vincent van Gogh is one of those artists whose reputation arrives fully pre-mythologized. The severed ear, the sunflowers, the whole tortured genius starter pack, and yet the actual man is somehow stranger, messier, and far more intentional than the legend would have you believe. Born in 1853 in the Netherlands, Van Gogh didn't even begin painting seriously until his late 20s, which in art world terms is less prodigy and more career pivot with catastrophic consequences. Over the course of just a decade, he produced more than 2,000 works of art, developing a style that would later define post-impressionism. Bold color, aggressive brushwork, and a kind of emotional immediacy that feels less like observation and more like confrontation. He sold almost nothing in his lifetime, relied heavily on his brother Theo for financial and emotional support, and died believing himself a failure. Which is, of course, exactly the kind of narrative history loves to romanticize, right before hanging his work in every museum gift shop on Earth. While reading this book, I couldn't help but see every biomusical ever in my head. Evita, aggressively insisting that politics is just vibes and high notes. Hamilton, hyper-compressing a founding father's entire life through a mixtape. MJ the musical, staging trauma like it's a particularly well-lit rehearsal process. All of them following the same invisible syllabus. Childhood wound. Early failure.
You firing me? You don't even pay me.
One symbolic prop or hand gesture. And an 11 o'clock number that arrives exactly when the protagonist has run out of other coping mechanisms, and then speed running to their death. I knew pretty early on that I didn't want to do that. If I was gonna make a Van Gogh musical, it had to justify its own existence, because otherwise, what are we doing here besides rebranding Wikipedia with a pit? So, step one was figuring out a musical palette, which sounds intentional and artistic, but is really just a polite way of saying I needed something, anything to start from. Because here's the fun part, I've never actually written a musical before.
Huh?
So instead of starting with plot or character, I started with sound. I wanted to write music that could function as a kind of foundation, something alive enough to grow from, flexible enough to evolve, and sturdy enough to not immediately collapse under the weight of my own inexperience. A sourdough starter, essentially. But with fewer probiotics and significantly more emotional instability. So the plan, if we're being generous and calling it that, was to just pick a moment and musicalize it. Start somewhere, anywhere. Which, of course, immediately brings us to the big one. Starry Night. The painting. The Van Gogh painting. The one that shows up in dorm rooms, doctors' offices, and every I took intro to art history once conversation. Not including it would feel less like a bold artistic choice and more like forgetting to mention Mario in a documentary about Nintendo. But I gave myself a rule, a hard one, a prime directive, if you will. It cannot be called Starry Night. It cannot use the phrase, the Starry Night. And it absolutely cannot, under any circumstances, go anywhere near Starry, Starry Night. So now the question isn't how do I write the Starry Night song? It's why this painting at all? What actually makes it essential, beyond the fact that it's been aggressively merchandised into cultural wallpaper? Why this and not, say, two crabs? Which, frankly, deserves better PR. And the answer didn't come from the painting. It came from the letters. Vincent had written hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of letters. And after his death and then his brother's death, Joanna, Theo's wife and Vincent's sister-in-law, decided to publish all the letters that Vincent had written between Theo and himself, giving a better insight into who he was as a man and getting more people to recognize him. This really delves into the idea of Joanna being the reason we know who Vincent van Gogh is at all now. We'll get to that at some point. I found a very specific letter to Theo where Vincent wrote, "Looking at the stars always makes me dream. Why, I ask myself, shouldn't the shining dots of the sky be as accessible as the black dots on the map of France?" And suddenly, the song stops being about a painting, because the painting isn't the point. It becomes about access, about distance and the audacity of wanting to close it, about looking at something impossibly far away and deciding irrationally and stubbornly that you should be able to reach it anyway. Art not as decoration, but as a method of entry. That was the way.
This is the way.
So, with my guitar, a moleskin, and the kind of acoustic privacy only a Holiday Inn Express bathroom can provide, I started writing what would eventually become Travel the Stars.
I've been thinking so much about you and my friend. Is it too much to ask for my mind to extend to the things that...
Once that song existed, like actually existed, not just I have a voice memo I'm afraid to revisit, I suddenly had something way more valuable than a finished piece. I had a vocabulary. Not just lyrically, but musically. A sense of how Vincent sounds, how he moves through a phrase, what feels like him versus what feels like me cosplaying a tortured artist with a capo. There were motifs too. Little musical ideas that were starting to feel sticky in the right way. One in particular, a guitar pattern that outlined an octave, drops down, then reaches back up before settling on the major seventh. It kept resurfacing, and the more I played it, the more it started to feel less like a choice and more like diagnosis. Because it never quite resolves. It reaches, it resets, and it almost lands, but it doesn't. Which, conveniently, is also the entire thesis of his life. So, as that leg of the Rent tour ended, I decided not to re-up my contract and went back to Long Island.
Long Island people like to drink coffee, shop at the mall, walk their dog, and swim in the water.
I kept doing what I assume is the official research process, buying increasingly specific books about Van Gogh, watching every adaptation I could find, and writing the show completely out of order like I was assembling a narrative via scattered puzzle pieces and vibes. It's great for depth, but less great for momentum, because if I'm being honest, Vincent wasn't the main event yet. It was the side project. The I'll get to it when I get to it project. The real focus was always the next gig, the next thing that paid, the next thing that moved, the next thing that made me feel like I was, doing a career.
I went to the stock market today. I did a business.
And then the entire world quietly starts rearranging itself.
Breaking developments in the coronavirus emergency in the U.S. and around the world. More than 80 million Americans now told to stay at home.
So life just stops, like someone quietly unplugging the world and then shrugging. Days blur into weeks, weeks blur into months, time becomes a flat circle, but with worse Wi-Fi. And theater, my entire ecosystem, is very clearly going to be the last thing that comes back. No surprises there. You can't exactly socially distance a chorus line. But God bless those theater kids, they tried. Oh, did they try. So the question becomes, now what? The answer is Vincent. Let's see if my musical sourdough starter can yield some bread. I'd sketch out a scene, and a song idea would show up almost immediately, like it had been waiting for me to finally get organized. For the first time, it felt less like I was searching and more like I was following something. Before long, I've got 10 songs, which is not a show, but it's no longer not a show.
What the hell does that mean?
For me, the plan was, once we reopen the world, to do a concert of the show, like just straight up a rock concert in the vein of the original Jesus Christ Superstar tour before Broadway. But how long is that going to be? And where am I going to get the money to fund that?
In terms of money, we have no money.
That idea went out the window pretty quick. So I did what every slightly unhinged artist does in a moment like this. I made a plan that was both practical and wildly optimistic. Why not make an EP? Pick 5 songs, record everything I can myself, send out some tracks to musicians, have them record at home, same thing with vocalists, build the whole thing remotely, piece by piece, like a theatrical Frankenstein assembled over email. So I started asking people, hey, want to record a musical alone in your home for no money and unclear purpose?
You son of a bitch, I'm in!
So I build tracks, rough ones, skeletons really. I write up sheet music, attach some extremely basic music direction like, here's the vibe, please bring your own emotional damage, and send everything out into the void. And then people actually send things back.
Message for you, son!
Not just placeholders, not just, hey, I tried, but real, thoughtful, fully formed performances. Pieces of a thing that didn't quite exist yet, but was really starting to. And at a certain point, I have the very rational, very measured thought of, okay, but what if we just do all of it? So I loop in more people, send out more charts, more tracks. The project starts expanding in real time. So now I have all these pieces, all these recordings, and conveniently, nothing but time. So I mix and remix, something of which I really had no idea how to do, and eventually, somehow, there it is, a concept album. It is objectively a sonic collage, a patchwork, a slightly chaotic blend of different spaces, setups, and recording qualities, but it's real. It exists, and at that point, that was kind of everything. Which naturally leads to the next completely rational escalation. This needs to physically exist. I start putting together the booklet, liner notes, lyrics, the whole thing. I asked every single person who recorded the album to send me their autograph. So I collaged them all together on the final page, this weird, beautiful accumulation of signatures, proof that all those isolated contributions actually came from real people, all existing in the same strange moment of time. And then I write a small little essay, which is certainly not a polished artist statement, just more of a warning. This album was recorded entirely during the coronavirus quarantine, and therefore, all vocals and instruments are recorded with whatever equipment people had on hand, from high-quality Sennheisers to the iPhone voice memos app. I myself had no shaker, and refusing to use loops, I resorted to a half-full container of Zorn's roasting spice. So, the quality does vary from track to track. It's a product of its time in the best way possible, and I couldn't be more proud. Look, I made a hat. So now the thing exists, physically, conceptually, and emotionally. And the question becomes, okay, now what?